He used to yell so loud the walls shook. Now I'm the one my daughter flinches around. The desk slammed so hard it cracked at the edge. The room went dead quiet. Not a phone buzzed, not a whisper stirred. 22 seventh graders stared at me like I was something they hadn't realized could bite. Then one of them, Ariel, started to cry. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, fists still clenched at my sides like they belonged to someone else. Her tears were soft at first, embarrassed, like she didn't want to make it worse. That's what cut me. That's what undid me. The bell rang 3 minutes later, but no one moved until I nodded toward the door. Even then, they crept out like mice, glancing over their shoulders like I might blow again. When the last one left, I sat down in the same chair my father used to drink in, the one I swore I'd burn the day I inherited it. Somehow it made its way from his house to mine, a silent beast in the corner of my den. And I sat in it, like he did. The same way. With my head in my hands. I didn't tell Erin about what happened. She asked how work was, and I said fine. She knew better than to press. Our daughter, Casey, was building a tower of blocks on the floor, humming to herself. I watched her hands. Delicate, careful. Like she was afraid to knock something over. She was 5. She shouldn't know how to be that cautious yet. Later that night, I stood in the doorway of her room and watched her sleep. She'd kicked the covers off and clutched a frayed bunny to her chest. Her brow was scrunched in a frown, even in dreams. I wanted to smooth it away, but my hands didn't trust themselves. I went back downstairs. Sat in the chair again. Dad would sit here with a bottle of Seagrams in one hand, a newspaper in the other. He'd mutter about taxes or the Packers or something Ma said. Then he'd yell. At the dog. At the TV. At me. When I was 11, he grabbed me by the collar and lifted me off the ground because I dropped a glass. Told me I was a damn disgrace. I remember the smell of whiskey on his breath and the color his face turned, not red, but purple, like something dying. I swore I'd never be like him. But when Ariel cried, it wasn't her face I saw. It was mine. The next morning, I called in sick. First time in 3 years. Erin didn't ask questions, but she gave me a look. Not judgment, just distance. Like she was watching me from the other side of something I hadn't noticed between us. I spent the day walking the perimeter of our yard, the same way Dad used to. Circles in the frost. Boots crunching like bones. The air bit at my ears, but I didn't go inside. When Erin brought me soup around noon, I told her. About the desk. About Ariel. About the way it felt when my hand came down like that, not because I was angry, but because it was too easy. She sat next to me on the porch swing. Didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "You need help. Real help." I nodded. "I know. We found a therapist in Cedar Rapids. A woman named Mara who looked more like someone's aunt than a shrink. She had kind eyes and a way of tilting her head when you talked, like the words mattered. I hated her for the first 3 sessions. Because she listened. By the 4th, I told her about the chair. About my dad. About the way the back of my neck prickles when Casey flinches. "The rage didn't start with you," she said, "but you get to decide where it ends." It sounded nice. Hopeful. But I didn't believe it. Because I know what it feels like when your voice goes too loud, and the room goes too quiet. I know the look kids give when they don't see a teacher anymore, just a man who might break. And I know what it is to be broken, and to carry that into someone else's life like an infection. So I started writing. Not a journal. Not yet. That felt too raw. Too much like admitting it was mine. Instead, I wrote letters. To him. "Dear Dad, you died 15 years ago, and I still hear your voice in the wood of this house. I still check the tone of my footsteps. I still flinch when I knock something off a shelf. Not because you're here, but because I am. I see you in me. And I hate it. But I think maybe that's the start. It wasn't good. It wasn't cathartic. But it was a start." Mara said to keep going. So I did. But what I didn't tell her, not yet, was that every night I sat in that chair, and I could still feel the warmth of his rage. Like it seeped into the fabric. Like it was waiting for me to pass it on. I started tracing the lineage of it. Rage. Mara told me to write it out like a map. To dig into the stories I knew, even if they were hand-me-downs, half-truths. So I drew a tree. Not the kind you hang in the hallway. The kind that grows underground, twisted and dark. Grandpa Roy, my dad's father, ran a feed store just outside of Ames. Never met the man. He died before I was born. But the stories my dad told when he was drunk painted a picture. Roy used to beat him with a belt. Not just when he screwed up, when he didn't finish chores fast enough. When he asked too many questions. When he cried. Crying's for girls, my dad would say, parroting it like gospel. Like he still believed it, even after all the damage it did. I remembered one story in particular. Dad was maybe 12. He said Roy caught him feeding a stray kitten out behind the store. Said it was a waste of food and made him drown it in a bucket. He told that story like it was funny. He laughed. Then he finished the bottle and didn't say anything for the rest of the night. And me, maybe 9 at the time, I just sat there, not knowing what to do with that image. A boy forced to kill something he wanted to protect. Something helpless. And then I realized maybe that's the point. That's how it starts. They break the softness in you before it can grow roots. Dad did that to me too. When I was 13, he found my sketchbook under my bed. I was drawing back then. Mostly trees, sometimes faces. He looked through it, page by page, then ripped it clean in half. Said, "You're not some kind of fairy, are you?" I didn't draw again for years. So when Mara asked me to write another letter, I knew what it needed to be. Not just to my father, but to Roy too. A man I never met. And yet whose shadow hung over every man that came after him like a noose. Dear Roy, I don't know the sound of your voice. I don't know what you smelled like, or how you laughed, or if you ever cried in the dark when no one could hear you. But I know what you did. You took my father's heart and taught it to fear softness. You beat the love out of him before it ever had a chance. And then he gave that to me. You handed him a belt, and he handed me silence. Bruises on the inside. You turned him into a man who broke his son because no one ever taught him how to hold him. I want to hate you. But what scares me more is the part of me that understands you. That knows how rage can become a kind of shelter. How fear becomes armor. That part's in me, too. And I'm trying to rip it out. When I read it back, I couldn't breathe. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. It felt like pulling the bone from a wound that never really healed. I told Mara I wanted to stop the letters. That they made it worse. She said, "No, they make it real. That's how it gets better." So I wrote one more. This one to Casey. I didn't give it to her, of course. She's 5. But I needed her to know. Someday. Dear Casey, I scared someone at school. And I scared myself, too. It felt like something took over. Like my body remembered a lesson I never meant to learn. When you build those towers, and your hands tremble like they're afraid to make a mistake, I see myself. Not the boy I was. The man I became. But I want you to know something. You will never have to earn my gentleness. You will never have to shrink yourself to make room for my moods. You are not a mirror for my pain. I am learning how to be soft again. For you. And for me. After that, I didn't sit in the chair as much. I started taking walks instead. Through the woods behind the school. Through the cornfields out by the edge of town. Places where silence meant peace, not punishment. One evening, Casey and I sat on the porch steps. She was eating a popsicle, red juice dripping down her chin. Out of nowhere, she said, "Daddy, why do you get sad sometimes when I laugh?" It hit me like a gut punch. I didn't know I did that. I swallowed. Because it reminds me of something I thought I lost. She nodded, as if that made perfect sense. And then she laughed again, louder this time. Like she was trying to give it back to me. Maybe she was. I went back to therapy the next week with a different kind of ache. Not guilt. Grief. For the boy I used to be. For the man I almost became. And for the little girl who laughed like she could still save me. The first time I hit something, I was 8. It was a coat rack in the mudroom. Cheap wood, already wobbly. I was mad about something stupid, a broken toy or spilled juice. I don't remember the reason. I just remember the sound it made when it fell, and the way my dad looked at me after. He smiled. Not a warm smile. Proud. Like he saw something in me that reminded him of himself. He clapped my shoulder and said, "Good. That's how a man handles frustration." I was 8. I believed him. It took me almost 30 years to unlearn that praise. And even now, it clings like old smoke in the curtains. That memory came up in session 6 with Mara. I hadn't thought about it in decades. But once it surfaced, I couldn't stop seeing it. The rack falling. My dad's smirk. The weight of his hand on my shoulder. Not comforting. Branding. "What would you say to that boy now?" Mara asked. "I'd tell him it's okay to cry. That anger isn't the only language he has." She smiled gently. "Then maybe write him a letter, too." I didn't want to. But I did. "Dear me. You didn't know. You were doing your best with what you were taught. When he told you that anger made you strong, you believed it, because what else did you have? But strength is knowing when to pause. When to breathe. When to listen. You are allowed to feel. All of it. The rage, yes, but also the fear, the sadness, the guilt. And especially the love. You are not your father. You are not Roy. You are you. And that is enough." I didn't cry when I wrote it. But I did when I read it to Mara the next week. She didn't speak until I was done. Then she said, "You're starting to reparent yourself. That's one of the hardest things to do." The idea stuck with me. Reparenting. Like I could go back and hold that boy's hand, even if no one ever held mine. I started journaling for real after that. At first it was just bullet points. Casey laughed today when I made her bunny talk like a pirate. I didn't raise my voice when she spilled juice. Just cleaned it up. I missed drawing. Then the entries got longer. Fuller. I started drawing again, too. Not well. Not yet. But with patience. Trees mostly. Still. I drew one with deep roots and a canopy so wide it spilled off the page. I showed it to Mara. She smiled and said, "That's what healing looks like." But healing isn't linear. 2 weeks later, I snapped again. Not at school. At home. Casey dropped my phone in the bathtub. It wasn't intentional. Just clumsy 5-year-old curiosity. But something in me short-circuited. I shouted. Not screamed. But loud enough to freeze her. She went silent. Her chin trembled. And then she said, "I'm sorry, Daddy. Please don't be mad." It was the please that broke me. She backed up like I might hit her. I dropped to my knees and pulled her into my arms. "I'm not mad. I'm not mad, baby. I just got scared. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She cried into my shirt, and I cried into her hair. Erin watched from the doorway. She didn't say anything. Just nodded. She knew. That night, I sat in the chair again. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. I opened my journal and wrote a different kind of letter. "Dear Rage, you kept me alive once. When I was small and afraid and had no one to protect me, you stepped in. You gave me teeth. But I don't need you like that anymore. Now you scare the people I love. So I'm setting you down. Not because you're evil. But because I have better tools now. You were survival. But I want to live." The next day, I gave the cracked desk at school a second look. The corner where my hand came down like thunder. I sanded it. Smoothed the edge. Then I wrote a sticky note and placed it on the surface. "I'm sorry. This won't happen again." Kids noticed it. Ariel gave me a small nod in class. She still didn't speak much around me. but she looked less afraid. That felt like enough for now. In therapy, Mara said, "You can't change what happened, but you're changing what happens next." I didn't believe her at first. But later that night, Casey ran to me when I got home. Arms wide, bunny in tow. "I miss you, Daddy." And I believed her. And I believed me, too. Even just a little. In the weeks that followed, I found myself waking up before dawn. Not because I had to, but because something in me needed the silence. The stillness. The air before the house came alive with footsteps and cereal bowls and car keys. I started sitting on the porch with coffee and a blanket, watching the horizon pink up behind the barn across the street. The cold bit through my hoodie, but I didn't mind. It made me feel real. Present. Not caught in the spinning reel of regrets. One morning, Casey joined me. She padded out in her little slippers, dragging Bunny by the ear, her eyes still foggy with sleep. "It's cold," she said. I opened the blanket, and she climbed under without asking. We didn't talk much. She rested her head on my side and watched the sky. Then she asked, "Why do you get up so early?" "Because it helps me feel better." "Better from what?" I paused. "Sometimes I wake up feeling heavy. Like I did something wrong even if I didn't. Being here helps me breathe through it." She nodded like that made perfect sense. Then she said, "You can breathe with me now." We inhaled together. Slow. Deep. It was the kind of moment I never got from my father, not once. And I held it like a glass figurine. In therapy that week, I told Mara about it. She smiled. "She's giving you what you're trying to give her." That night, Erin found me in the garage, sketching. "Haven't seen you do that in a while," she said. "Yeah. It's been helping." She came closer, studied the page. "Is that your dad?" It was. Unintentionally. A shadowy figure behind a boy in a field. Arms crossed. Face indistinct. "Sort of," I said. "Looks more like you." That sat in my stomach for the rest of the night. He and I, our silhouettes, were too close sometimes. Blurred. So I wrote another letter. "Dear Ghost, I used to think you lived in the old chair. In the smell of seagrams. In the echo of slamming doors and flickering lights. But now I think you live in me. Not as a demon, but as a wound. You never got the help you needed. Maybe you didn't know it was even possible. But I do. And I'm getting it. Every time I pause. Every time I choose softness. Every time I let Casey see me cry. I'm laying you to rest. Not with hate. Not with blame. But with distance. You can stay in the past. I'm not dragging you into the future." That weekend we visited Mom. She still lived in the same farmhouse, though Dad had been gone almost 16 years. The walls were full of old photos, black and white smiles, faded holidays, graduation caps. In the kitchen, while Casey played with a drawer of Tupperware, I asked Mom something I'd never dared before. "Did he ever say he was sorry?" She didn't look at me. Just kept drying a plate. "Not with words. But sometimes he'd buy you a new baseball. Or put extra whipped cream on your pie. That was his way. Did you ever ask him to stop?" She finally met my eyes. "Once. After he called you stupid. I told him if he didn't knock it off, I'd leave. And? He didn't say it again. Not in front of me, anyway." I didn't know how to feel about that. Relief? Anger? "You were just a kid," she added. "And I was scared, too." We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "But you're not him. You know that, right?" I nodded. "Most days. That little girl of yours? She knows it every day." On the drive home, Casey fell asleep in the back seat, arms wrapped around Bunny. Erin reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're doing good," she said. I didn't say anything. Because in that moment, I believed it. Not perfectly. Not always. But enough. Enough to keep going. Enough to know the hallway no longer echoes with his footsteps alone. Now it echoes with laughter, with forgiveness, and with the quiet, steady sound of a man learning how to be whole. I started reading again. Books I used to skim in college, back when I thought being a teacher was about red pens and lesson plans, not heartbreak and mirrors. One afternoon, I found a line in a Baldwin essay that stopped me cold. Asterisk. You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read. I must have read it 5 times. Out loud. Like saying it would carve the truth deeper. Later that night, after Casey went to bed, I told Erin about it. She was folding laundry on the couch, the room lit soft by a single lamp. You ever read something and it feels like it was written for your blood? She smiled without looking up. Yeah. I have. It made me feel less alone. Even if it hurt. She set a towel down and looked at me. Maybe that's the point. I started keeping a list of sentences that felt like that. I copied them into the back of my sketchbook. Words that didn't try to fix me, just saw me. When I showed them to Mara, she said, "You're building a new language for yourself. One that doesn't start with yelling." Sometimes I still heard my dad's voice. Not in my head, in my tone. When I got tired. When I felt dismissed. When Casey didn't listen the 3rd time. It would slip out, brittle and sharp, and then I'd feel it crawl back inside me like something ashamed of being seen. But the difference now was what came after. I apologized. Not vague apologies. Real ones. I scared you. I'm sorry. That's not your fault. And over time, Casey stopped flinching when I raised my voice to call her name. She started saying, "It's okay, Daddy. I know you love me." And every time, it felt like a thread was being sewn into a place I didn't know had torn. One evening, I picked her up from school and found a drawing in her cubby. A stick figure family. A sun with a smile. A house with smoke coming out the chimney. Me, drawn tallest, holding her hand. Underneath, in wobbly letters, "My daddy is the nicest daddy." I had to sit in the car for 10 minutes before I could drive. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I wanted to. I showed Mara the picture. "Is it strange that it makes me sad?" "Not strange," she said. "It means you care enough to wonder if you deserve it." Some days I did. Some days I didn't. But the gap between those days was shrinking. Around that time, my school district started offering a wellness initiative. One of the suggestions was a peer journaling circle. Teachers who met once a week after school to write. Not about students. About themselves. I didn't want to go. I went anyway. We sat in the library, a circle of 8. 1 guidance counselor, 2 math teachers, the janitor who moonlighted as a poet, and a few of us who weren't sure why we came at all. The first prompt was simple. What have you inherited that you no longer want to carry? I stared at the page for 10 minutes. Then I wrote. His silence. His shame. His story that said love has to hurt to be real. The janitor, Greg, shared a poem about his father's fists and his mother's hymns. The math teacher cried. The air felt different after that. Like we were no longer just teachers, but survivors passing each other little flares in the dark. I stayed late. Talked to Greg about poetry. He told me to bring a drawing next time. So I did. A sketch of a hand reaching out to a smaller hand. Both weathered. Both still open. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "That looks like forgiveness." I didn't know who the hands belonged to. But maybe that didn't matter. Maybe it was enough that they reached. That they didn't close. That they didn't hit. A month after that, the school had a lockdown drill. I was teaching a unit on local geography when the voice crackled over the intercom. "This is a drill. Lockdown in effect." The door clicked shut behind me. I turned off the lights. Drew the blinds. Told the kids to get low and stay quiet. It wasn't real. But the fear was. One of the students, a wiry boy named Miguel, started breathing fast. Real fast. I could see his hands shaking. I slid across the room and knelt beside him, whispering, "You're okay. It's just practice. You're safe. I'm right here. And I meant it. Every word. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about how many kids live in a constant state of alert. How many of them walk into classrooms already afraid. How many come from homes like mine. I wrote about it in the journaling circle. We're asking them to feel safe in a world where adults keep showing them danger. Sometimes the hallway doesn't echo with learning. It echoes with footsteps running the wrong direction. Greg shared another poem. This one about the first time his son asked if monsters were real and he didn't know how to answer. We all sat with that. Mara and I talked about fear at our next session. How much of your anger comes from fear? She asked. Almost all of it. Fear of what? Losing control. Becoming him. Not being enough. Hurting her. She nodded. Those are fears of a man who wants to be better. The next day I wrote a letter I hadn't wanted to write. Not to my dad. Not to Roy. Not even to Casey. To Aaron. Dear Aaron. You saw the cracks long before I did. You waited while I stumbled through the rubble. You protected Casey when I didn't know how. And you still reached for me, even when I recoiled. I don't know how you did it. I know I said I'd never be like him. I said it on our wedding night. Said it like a promise. But I didn't understand then that inheritance is more than blood. It's behavior. It's silence. It's what fills the room when we don't talk about the past. You stayed. But more than that, you softened me. Not by force. By showing me it was possible. Thank you for every moment you chose to believe there was still more of me to find. I printed it. Folded it. Left it on her pillow. She didn't say anything the next morning. But she kissed me longer than usual before I left for work. That evening, when I got home, I found my sketchbook on the counter. She'd bookmarked a page with a note. Draw more trees. Yours grow better now. I took Casey out that weekend. Just the two of us. We walked the trails behind the cornfields, where the trees bent low from the wind and the earth smelled like thaw. She held my hand the whole time. She asked questions about bugs and stars and why puddles look like mirrors. I told her everything I knew. And when I didn't know, I said, "Let's find out together." At one point she stopped, turned to me, and asked, "Daddy, do you ever get scared?" "All the time," I said. "Even big people?" "Especially big people." She thought about that. Then she hugged my leg. "That's okay. I can be brave with you." She skipped ahead after that, dancing on the path like the world had never taught her fear. And maybe, for a moment, it hadn't. Maybe healing looks like letting her keep that dance a little longer. Maybe it looks like learning the steps myself. And maybe, just maybe, it looks like a man holding space for a child to feel joy in a world that once taught him only survival. No more echoes. Just laughter. And the quiet rhythm of footsteps learning to walk towards something better. One night, I dreamed of the hallway. The one from my childhood. Narrow. Dim. Wallpaper peeling at the corners. The kind of yellow light that never felt warm. I was walking down it barefoot, the carpet rough, and every door I passed was closed. Behind one, I heard my father yelling. Behind another, crying. One door had the sound of silence, the kind that screams in your bones. I opened the last door, and it was a mirror. Not a room. Just glass. And in the reflection, I saw my own face, yelling. I woke up with my fists clenched. Aaron was already up. Making coffee in the kitchen. Casey was humming to cartoons in the next room. And I sat there in bed, afraid to move. Like I'd brought something back with me from the dream. Later that day, I told Mara. "Sounds like your mind is confronting what's left," she said. "What if I never stop seeing him in me? Maybe you won't. But maybe seeing him means you're watching. Maybe that's how you keep from becoming him." I didn't know how to accept that. I wanted erasure. What I got was awareness. That night I took the chair, his chair, out to the curb. I didn't make a show of it. Didn't smash it or set it on fire. Just carried it out, quietly, like it was something heavy and tired. The next morning, it was gone. Someone must have taken it. Or the garbage men hauled it off with the rest of the week's refuse. Either way, it wasn't mine anymore. And that mattered more than I thought it would. In its place, I put a small bookshelf. Filled it with the stories that saved me, Baldwin, Angelou, Machado, even some children's books Casey insisted I read out loud. Where once there was rage, now there were words. A week later, I found a folded note in Casey's backpack. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Just her uneven handwriting. Sometimes my daddy used to be sad. But now he is nicer. He draws trees and helps me find bugs. I think he likes me forever. I sat on the floor of the hallway with that note in my hands and cried. Not quiet tears. The kind that shake your chest open. I didn't show Aaron. Didn't show Mara. It felt like a sacred thing. Like some part of the curse had broken, and this was the sound of it leaving. At school I was different. Not fixed. But present. I noticed the quiet kids more. Noticed which ones flinched at sudden sounds. Which ones always sat closest to the door. And one afternoon, when Miguel froze during a fire drill, I walked over, knelt down, and whispered, "You okay, buddy?" He looked at me with wet eyes and nodded. But I stayed beside him anyway. Just breathing. Later, I drew a comic strip for the class. A silly one. A superhero who uses breathing techniques instead of punches. I called him Captain Calm. The kids loved it. Even Ariel. At journaling circle that week, I shared the story. Greg laughed. "You went from punching desks to publishing cartoons," he said. "That's an arc." "It's a start," I said. And in that moment, I felt like maybe the hallway I'd walked all my life didn't have to stay haunted. Maybe I could repaint the walls. Maybe I already was. One conversation. One drawing. One soft word at a time. The echoes didn't stop. But they no longer belonged to him. They belonged to me. And they sounded like hope. The first time I laughed and didn't feel guilty, it caught me off guard. Casey was pretending to be a dog, barking at the mail, crawling under the table, licking my face. I laughed so hard I snorted. Aaron joined in, and for a second the house sounded like a place where no one had ever yelled. Then I felt it. That tug in my chest? Not joy. Guilt. Like I didn't deserve it. Like I hadn't earned the right to be this light. Mara warned me it might feel that way. When you come from chaos, peace feels unnatural. You have to teach your body that safety isn't a trick. So I laughed again. On purpose. I made myself laugh until it felt like mine. One night, I found an old voicemail from my dad. I don't know why I never deleted it. "Hey. Just calling to see if the Packers game's on your end. Might come by Sunday. If you've got time." It was from 2 months before he died. I listened to it twice. There was no apology in his voice. No warmth either. Just that same gruff nothingness. But something about the way he said, "If you've got time," made me pause. Like he knew he didn't deserve it. Like maybe he was trying. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if it matters. I played it for Mara. She asked, "Do you want to respond? To a dead man? To the part of you that still wants to answer?" So I wrote one more letter. "Dear Dad, I miss you. Even when you were there, I miss you. I used to imagine you dying and me feeling nothing. But when it actually happened, I cried in the garage so no one would see. You broke things in me. Trust. Safety. Belonging. But you gave me some things too. Not the good kind. You gave me the work. The choice. The fire to be someone else. And maybe that's a gift, in its own way. A hard, ugly one. I forgive you. Not for you. For me. Because I want to stop walking down that hallway. Because I want my daughter to see my face and never wonder if it's about to become yours." I folded it and tucked it inside the back of my sketchbook. Later that week, Greg invited me to speak at a local youth group he helped run. He said they were doing a night on cycles, addiction, poverty, violence. He thought I had something to say. I wasn't sure. You don't have to be perfect to speak, he said. Just honest. So I did. I told them about the desk. The dream. The note in Casey's backpack. I told them about Roy. About my dad. About how easy it is to become the thing you swore you'd never be. And how hard it is to become something else. They listened. Some with arms crossed. Some with heads bowed. Afterward, a teenage boy with chipped nail polish came up and said, "My stepdad screams. Like a lot. Sometimes he hits the table so hard I think it's gonna split." I nodded. I know that sound. You think I'll turn out like him? Not if you already hate how it feels. He didn't smile. But his shoulders eased a little. Greg clapped me on the back as we left. You're planting seeds. Let's hope they grow. They will. Just keep watering them. At home that night, Casey was asleep, arms sprawled across her bed like she trusted the night to hold her. I stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. Then I whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." The hallway behind me didn't echo. It stayed quiet. And I walked away without looking back. Spring came late that year. The snow didn't melt so much as vanish. One day it was there, the next it wasn't. And in its place, the ground softened. Everything was thawing. I started going on runs again. Slow, measured ones. Just enough to feel my breath. Just enough to remind myself I had a body, not just a history. One afternoon, I took Casey with me. She rode her bike with the training wheels rattling, and I jogged beside her, calling out turns like some gentle traffic cop. She asked if I was tired. A little. But you're still going. Yeah, I said. Still going. She nodded like that meant something. Maybe it did. Later that day, I found her drawing at the kitchen table. Another family picture. But this one had more color. The sun had a rainbow halo. She'd drawn me holding not just her hand, but Aaron's too. Underneath, she'd written, "We are safe together." I stared at it longer than I should have. Aaron put a hand on my back and said, "She knows." That night, I had a new dream. Same hallway. But the doors were open this time. Light in every room. And at the end, a mirror again. I approached it slowly, afraid of what I'd see. But when I looked, it wasn't him. It was me. Tired, yes. Worn. But standing tall. And behind me, Casey. Aaron. Even Greg laughing. Mara, writing something in her notebook. All the people who saw me, not as broken, but becoming. I woke up crying. But this time, it felt like release. I wrote about it in the circle. Drew the hallway. The open doors. The light. Greg pointed at it and said, "That's not a hallway anymore. That's a bridge." He was right. At school, I caught Ariel after class one day. I wanted to say sorry again. I told her. For that day. She shrugged, but not with bitterness. "You've been better. Trying to be. You are." Simple words. Heavy impact. I sent Mara a photo of the hallway drawing. She replied with a single sentence. "Your story is changing shape." She asked if I wanted to record something for a group she worked with, a men's shelter downtown. Just a short story. A message of hope. I hesitated. "You don't have to be a hero," she said. "Just be honest. That's enough." So I sat at my desk, pressed record, and told the truth. Told them about my dad. About the chair. About the time I slammed a desk so hard a child cried. And about the way forgiveness is not a light switch, it's a lamp you turn on, one dim click at a time, until you can see your own face again without flinching. I ended the recording by saying, "You are not the worst thing you've done. And you're not the man who raised you. You're the one standing here now, deciding what comes next." When I sent it, I didn't expect a reply. But 2 days later, Mara forwarded me a message from a man named Daniel. "I haven't seen my daughter in 5 years. Your story made me want to try again." I read it 3 times. Then I whispered, "Please do. Because that's what this is, isn't it? Not a redemption arc. A rescue. Not from the past. From the belief that we're stuck inside it." And in the quiet that followed, I sketched a new picture, a hallway becoming a bridge. The figure walking across it wasn't a boy anymore. It was a father. And his hands were open. Casey turned 6 the day the apple tree bloomed. We threw her a party in the backyard. Nothing big, just a few friends, cupcakes, sidewalk chalk. She wore a crown made of construction paper and told everyone she was queen of bugs. I stood by the grill, tongs in hand, watching her run in loops with a balloon tied to her wrist. Erin came over, slid her arm around me, and said, "You look proud." "I am." And I was. Not just of Casey. Of the life we built. The one I thought I'd never be allowed to have. The one I almost ruined before it could root. Later, after the sun dipped low and the kids had gone home, we lit a few candles and sat in the yard. Casey curled up in Erin's lap, already half asleep. I looked at the tree. Blossoms wide open, petals spilling like quiet declarations. It used to be just a stump when we moved in. I almost cut it down. "You remember when we thought that tree was dead?" I asked. Erin nodded. "Sometimes things come back." That night, I opened my journal and wrote my final letter. Not to Dad. Not to Roy. Not even to myself. To the cycle. "Dear inheritance. You've been with me a long time. Longer than I understood. You showed up and slammed doors, and held breath, in the way my daughter shrunk when my voice rose. You were my father's language. And his father's before that. You taught me how to survive, but not how to love. I used to think beating you meant becoming perfect. Now I know better. Beating you means showing up. It means apologizing. It means laughing without guilt. Holding without fear. And leaving space for softness where silence once lived. You don't own me anymore. I am not your vessel. I am my own voice. And this ends with me." The next day, I brought the letter to therapy. Mara read it, nodded, then said, "You've grieved the man you were, honored the boy you were, and made room for the father you're becoming. Becoming. Always becoming." I asked Casey that evening what she wanted to be when she grew up. "A kindness teacher," she said. "Like you? I teach geography. But you teach nice too. You help people feel better." Maybe that was true. Maybe healing is never loud. Maybe it shows up in crayons and cupcakes and a kid who doesn't flinch when you walk in the room. Months passed. Summer settled in. I published a piece in the local paper. About rage. About lineage. About how we don't talk enough about what fathers leave behind, and what we choose to carry forward. Greg read it at the circle. "That last line," he said. "Damn. My father left me his shadow. I turned it into a door. A door. That felt right. Because now, when I stand in the hallway, my hallway, it doesn't echo the way it used to. It doesn't whisper his name. It doesn't ask me to yell. Now, it carries footsteps. Light ones. Little ones. Laughter. It carries mine. And Casey's. And someday, maybe hers will carry another's. But they won't carry fear. They'll carry peace. Because I did the work. Because I broke the chain. Because I chose to open the door and walk through. Hands open. Voice soft. Heart at last my own.